My wife cheated on me with our neighbor and secretly stole $200, $0 from our joint account to buy a house with him. Now she's threatening to take everything in a bitter court fight over our estate. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing this kind of story, but here we are. It all started with little signs, you know. Things that didn't seem like a big deal at first, but looking back, they were like flashing neon signs pointing straight to betrayal. My wife had always been a bit of a bitch about money, stingy with her time, quick to criticize, but I never suspected she was capable of lying the way she did. We had a pretty decent life, or so I thought. 2 kids, a nice house, and jobs that paid the bills. But somewhere along the way, I started noticing small things that didn't add up. It all kicked off about 3 months ago. Started coming home late more often, claiming she was working late at the office. She'd say she needed to finish a project, or that her boss, Jessica, kept her there to meet tight deadlines. But I knew Jessica, she was a friend, and honestly never talked about work like that before. She'd always be home by 6:30, give or take, and suddenly she was rolling in around 9 or later, smelling different, acting tense. Then there was the money. We had a joint account, nothing crazy, just a regular savings and checking. But I started noticing strange charges on the credit card. Small stuff at first, dinner here, a few drinks there. Nothing unusual, but then I saw a bigger one, a $20, $0 withdrawal from our savings account. I thought maybe it was a mistake or some kind of joint expense I forgot about. When I asked about it, she brushed it off, saying she'd taken some money out to cover a business investment she was planning. Said she'd explain more later, but she looked nervous, and that's when I started to get suspicious. And then came the biggest shock. I decided to check our bank statements more carefully after she left for work one morning. I pulled up the account on my phone and my jaw hit the floor. There was a transfer of $200, $0, gone, just like that. No note, no warning. That kind of money doesn't just disappear. I knew it had to be her. I couldn't believe it. I sat there staring at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. That night I confronted her. I waited until she got home, my stomach twisting with a mix of anger and dread. I told her I knew about the money, about her late nights, and about the strange charges. Her expression didn't change much, but her eyes flickered with something, guilt, or maybe just her usual bitchy arrogance. She looked at me and said, "You're overreacting. It's all a misunderstanding. I've been stressed and I needed to do this for us. You're just paranoid." That lie rolled off her tongue so easily, like she'd rehearsed it. I felt my blood boil. How could she lie so effortlessly, especially about something so huge? I pressed her, demanding to know where the money was, what she was doing with it. She shrugged, smirking almost, and told me she was buying a house with her friend, the neighbor, Mark. Said they'd been talking about it for months, and I was just too blind to see she was planning her escape. She claimed I was paranoid, jealous, and that I was ruining everything. I asked her outright if she'd been cheating, and she just laughed, that bitchy laugh that made me want to punch her, but I held back. I knew this was just the start of something much worse. The emotional impact hit me like a freight train. I felt numb, then furious, then devastated. How could she do this? To me, to the kids. I'd trusted her with everything, our life savings, our future. And now I realized she'd been lying to my face all along. I kept asking myself, how long has she been sneaking around? Was I blind? Did she ever love me? Or was I just a placeholder until she found her next asshole to cheat on me with? The betrayal cut deep, and I didn't sleep that night. All I could think about was the fact that she'd been screwing our neighbor, Mark, behind my back, stealing our money to buy a house with him, and had the nerve to lie about it all. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there and pretend everything was fine. But what? Confronting her again seemed pointless now. I was angry, yes, but also hurt, more than I'd ever been before. The next day I started digging into her phone, her emails, anything that could give me more clues. That's when I found texts. Lots of them. Flirty messages with Mark, plans to meet, promises of a new life together. She was planning her escape, and she didn't care who she hurt in the process. That's when I realized I'd been played for a fool. And the worst part, she was convinced she was right. She was the victim here, not the betrayed husband. I won't lie, the feelings are still raw. I feel stupid for trusting her, betrayed beyond what I thought was possible. But I also feel a fire inside me now, a need for justice, for revenge. She's been lying, stealing, cheating, and she thinks she can just walk away with everything. Not on my watch. I have a plan. I don't know exactly how it will play out yet, but I do know that I'm not going to let her get away with this. She's not just a cheating wife. She's a thief and a manipulator, and I intend to make her pay. After I found out about the money and saw those texts, everything changed. I mean, I'd always known she was a bitch, but now I saw her for what she really was, a liar, a thief, and a manipulator. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. The worst part, she still had the nerve to act like she was the victim, like I was the crazy one for suspecting her. She kept insisting she was stressed, overwhelmed, that she needed to do this for us, for our future. But I knew better. I saw her sneaking around, talking to Mark behind my back, planning her move, and I realized I had to act fast. That night I stayed up, going through every message, every email, trying to piece together her game plan. I needed to understand how deep this went. I wasn't just angry, I was furious. I started thinking about the money, how much she'd stolen, what she intended to do with it. And I remembered something she said during the fight. She mentioned buying a house with Mark. That was it. I had to stop her before she completely destroyed what was left of our lives. The next morning, I decided I'd confront her again, but this time with a plan. I wanted to catch her in the act if possible. I set up hidden cameras around the house, especially in the bedroom and her phone charging station. I wanted proof, clear-cut evidence. I also contacted a lawyer just in case she decided to go through with her threats. I knew she was planning something, I could feel it. She was bitchy, manipulative, and she'd never played fair before. I had to be ready. Meanwhile, kept acting normal, too normal. She'd get up, pretend everything was fine, but I caught her sneaking around, trying to hide her phone, deleting messages. I knew she was panicked. I could see it in her eyes. And when she thought I wasn't looking, she'd slip out at odd hours, probably to meet Mark or deal with her plans. I even followed her once just to be sure. She went to supposed work dinner, but I knew better. She drove straight to the neighbor's house. I saw her go in and I stayed in my car watching. That was when I realized how deep her lies went. What made it worse was her constant denial. She kept telling me I was paranoid, that I was imagining things. She had the nerve to call me insecure, to say I didn't trust her, but I knew the truth. I had proof of her cheating, her stealing, and her betrayal. The more she lied, the angrier I got. I kept thinking about the money, about how she had secretly taken it, about how she was planning to leave me and the kids with nothing. She was trying to turn it around, make me look like the bad guy, but I wasn't going to let her. I decided I needed to confront her again, but this time with the evidence. I sat her down, laid everything out, texts, bank statements, the times I followed her. Her face went pale, and for a moment I thought she might crack. But then she doubled down, accusing me of being crazy, of spying on her, of trying to control her. That was her typical response: blame everyone else, deny everything, and act like she's the victim. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I knew about the affair, about the money, about her plans to buy a house with Mark. That's when she finally lost her cool. She started screaming, calling me a jealous idiot, saying I was insecure and controlling. She said she was doing all this because I was a terrible husband, that I never paid enough attention to her, that I was too boring. She told me she was tired of living like a prisoner, that she deserved better. She even had the gall to say she loved me once, but now she was just done. That moment I saw her for what she really was, a selfish, manipulative bitch who'd been cheating, stealing, and lying right in front of my face. The betrayal cut so deep I felt like I was suffocating, but I also felt something else: clarity. I realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. My entire life was a lie. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer, and I was just the fool who didn't see it. I knew I had to make a choice. I couldn't let her get away with stealing our money, ruining our family, and destroying everything we'd built. I decided I'd gather all the evidence I could, take her to court if I had to, and fight for what's mine. I wasn't going to let her walk away with our house, our savings, or our kids' future, not without a fight. So now I'm sitting here trying to figure out my next move. I've got the proof, the lawyer on speed dial, and a plan to confront her again, this time with everything laid out. I don't know exactly how it's going to end, but I do know one thing. This isn't over. She's not going to cheat, steal, and lie her way out of this without paying a price. I just wish I'd seen it sooner, wish I noticed all the signs. But now that I do, I'm ready to fight for what's rightfully mine. After I gathered all the evidence and saw how Deep's lies went, I knew I couldn't just sit around waiting for her next move. She was clearly panicked, trying to cover her tracks, but I had enough now to turn the tables. The thing that really pushed me was the amount of money she'd stolen. 200. That's not small change, and she'd planned to buy a house with Mark, probably to start their new life together. I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to act fast, so I called my lawyer first thing that morning. I wanted to know my options, and I needed to get my ducks in a row. While waiting for the lawyer, I decided to do a little more digging. I hired a private investigator to follow. I figured if she was sneaking around with Mark, I needed concrete proof of their meetings. I also wanted to see if she was trying to move the money or hide her plans. The investigator was discreet, and within a day, he had some shocking footage. Was indeed meeting Mark late at night, often in the garage or the neighbor's backyard. Sometimes they'd just sit and talk, other times they'd kiss or hold hands. Seeing it with my own eyes made my stomach turn. I felt sick, but at the same time I knew this evidence was going to be crucial. That afternoon, I confronted her again. I didn't want to do it alone, so I invited her to sit down with me, my lawyer on speakerphone. I laid out everything: texts, bank statements, the private investigator's footage. Her face twisted into a sneer, but she tried to deny everything at first. She said I was paranoid, jealous, that I was just insecure because she was so much better than me. She told me I was just imagining things, that Mark was just a friend, and that the money was for a business venture she'd been planning. I cut her off. I told her I knew she'd been lying all along, that I had proof of her affair and her theft. Her eyes flickered with something, panic maybe, or anger. That's when she snapped. She started shouting, calling me all sorts of names: controlling, obsessive, insecure. She said I was ruining everything and that she'd had enough of my accusations. She was crying now, but I didn't feel sorry for her. All I felt was rage. I told her she was a liar and a thief, and I was done playing her game. I told her she's not taking anything from me or my family. No house, no money, no future. She kept insisting she was the victim, that I was the one cheating on her with my suspicion. I told her that her lies had broken whatever trust we had left, and I was done pretending everything was fine. I then handed her a sealed envelope with the evidence: screenshots, bank statements, videos, everything I had. Her face went pale when she saw the files. I told her I was going to take legal action and that she'd be hearing from my lawyer soon. Her reaction was a mix of anger and desperation. She yelled, called me a controlling bastard, said I was ruining her life. But I didn't care. I knew what she was capable of, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this. I felt an odd mixture of relief and disgust. Relief that I finally had proof, and disgust that I'd been so blind for so long. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing. I kept thinking about all the lies, the stolen money, and how she thought she could just walk away with her new life with Mark. I kept looking at the evidence I had collected, wondering how much more she was hiding. I knew I had to brace myself for the legal battle ahead. Was bitchy, manipulative, and she'd do anything to win. She'd threaten, lie, even try to turn the kids against me if she could. I had to stay strong, keep my head clear. I was determined to fight for what's rightfully mine, for my family's future. I also started thinking about what I'd do if she tried to take everything in court. She'd already stolen a huge chunk of our savings, and she was threatening a bitter fight over the estate. Honestly, I'd never been in this kind of situation before, but I knew I couldn't just roll over. I contacted a forensic accountant to trace the money, see where it went, and build a case. I wanted to show the court that she'd been dishonest and manipulative from the start. I also contacted friends and family to get support, because I knew this was going to be a long, ugly fight. In the end, I realized that this wasn't just about the money or the affair. It was about respect, trust, and the fact that I'd been played for a fool. Was a bitchy, selfish woman who thought she could do whatever she wanted, cheat and steal, and then lie her way out of it. But I wasn't going to let her. I was going to fight for my right to the house, for the money she stole, and for my children's future. I don't know how this will all end, but I do know I'm done being the victim. Now I'm the one fighting back. The days that followed were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and planning. I spent every waking moment trying to get my head around the mess had created. The evidence I had collected was solid. Bank statements showing the $200, $0 withdrawal, the texts with Mark, the private investigator's footage. I knew I had a strong case, but I also knew wouldn't go down without a fight. She was bitchy, manipulative, and she loved to twist everything to her advantage. Still, I had to stay calm and keep my focus. One thing that really stuck with me was how she kept trying to gaslight me during our confrontations. She would deny everything, call me paranoid or jealous, and accuse me of ruining her life. She even had the nerve to say she was the victim. That made my blood boil. I knew better. I knew she was the one cheating and stealing, but I also knew she'd try to spin things in court, make me look like the bad guy. That's why I hired a good lawyer, someone who knew how to handle manipulative women like her. I wanted to build a case that would prove her lies and her theft beyond any doubt. Meanwhile, behavior grew more erratic. She started acting defensive, snapping at the kids, and trying to spin stories about how I was controlling or abusive. She accused me of spying, of invading her privacy, all while hiding her own secret affairs. I noticed she'd been trying to sell the house secretly, probably to get rid of her evidence or to hide her assets. I had to get ahead of her moves, so I contacted the court to file for an emergency restraining order. I didn't want her to sell or hide anything further. I also warned my lawyer about her possible attempts to transfer assets or make sudden moves. One night, I caught her trying to pack her bags. She was sneaking around, looking like a thief in her own home. When I confronted her, she pretended to be innocent, saying she was just taking some clothes to stay at a friend's house. But I knew better. I saw the packed bags, the hurried look in her eyes. I told her. She wasn't going anywhere until this was resolved legally. She spat at me, calling me a controlling asshole, and said she'd make sure I'd regret this. That's when I realized she was planning to run, to disappear with the money and her new life with Mark. I felt a mix of anger and helplessness. I couldn't let her do that. The legal battle started to heat up. My lawyer filed for full disclosure of assets, and we demanded her to return the stolen money. She responded with more lies, claiming she was saving us from financial ruin, that the money was an investment for the family's future. But I knew better. I had her texts, her bank records, the private investigator's footage. I had her dead to rights. Still was good at twisting things around. She threatened to sue me for defamation if I kept pushing her. She said I was ruining her reputation, turning her into some kind of villain. But I didn't care. I had the proof, and I was determined to see this through. What made it even more complicated was her attempt to turn the court against me. She hired her own lawyer, tried to claim I was an unfit father, that I was controlling and abusive. She painted herself as the innocent victim. She's the wronged wife, the one trying to save her marriage. But I knew better. I had the evidence. I knew what she was capable of. I also knew she was trying to use the kids as pawns, to make me look bad so she could get full custody or at least a bigger share of the estate. That's when I decided I needed to step up my game. I hired a custody evaluator, prepared my case, and started gathering character witnesses. Throughout all this chaos, I felt like I was losing myself. The betrayal, the lies, the theft, it was all so overwhelming. I kept asking myself how I missed the signs, how I was so blind to her true nature. But I also realized I had to stay strong for the kids, for myself. I couldn't let her manipulate me into giving up or giving in. I had to fight for what was rightfully mine. The more she tried to spin her story, the more I knew I had to keep my head clear and focus on the facts. In the end, I learned a lot about trust and betrayal. I thought I knew my wife, but I was wrong. She was a manipulative, selfish woman who would do anything to get what she wanted: money, freedom, her own happiness at my expense. I also learned that sometimes you have to fight dirty just to get back what's yours. She played dirty from the start, so I had to do the same. I won't pretend this is over yet, but I do know one thing: I'm not backing down. I'm going to see this through, no matter how bitter or ugly it gets. Because at the end of the day, I want my life back. My house, my money, my dignity, and most of all, my peace of mind. The court dates kept piling up, and every hearing revealed just how manipulative could be. She was good at spinning stories, crying on cue, and acting like the wronged wife. But I had the evidence, her texts, the bank records, the private investigator's footage, and I made sure the court saw it all. My lawyer hammered her with questions about the stolen money and her affair with Mark. She tried to deny everything but her. Lies crumbled under cross-examination. Still, her bitchy attitude didn't change. She was relentless, trying to paint herself as the victim and me as the controlling asshole. One of the most shocking moments came when she accused me of domestic abuse, saying I was violent and unstable. I was stunned. I never laid a finger on her, but she knew how to twist things. She hired her own attorney and brought in a custody evaluator who seemed sympathetic to her sob story. I knew I had to step up my game. I gathered character references, friends, neighbors, my boss, people who could testify that I was a good father and a stable, responsible man. I also hired a forensic accountant to trace every penny of the stolen money to prove she'd been lying about her business investments. Meanwhile, threats escalated. She told me she'd take everything, our house, our savings, the kids, and that she'd make sure I'd regret ever confronting her. She said I was a controlling, jealous monster who had ruined her life. The worst part, she kept trying to turn the kids against me, telling them I was mean and abusive. I knew I had to be smart because she was good at manipulation. I started documenting every interaction with the kids, making sure I kept a journal of our conversations and activities. I also hired a child psychologist to evaluate the kids' well-being, just in case she tried to claim I was unfit. During this stressful period, I realized how much I'd underestimated her. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. The house was a pawn, a bargaining chip she wanted to use to get what she wanted. I knew I had to protect it, my home, my life, my future. So I filed a motion for full financial disclosure, demanding she account for every penny she took. I also requested an emergency hearing to prevent her from selling or transferring assets. Money was the main weapon in her arsenal, and I had to cut her off before she drained us completely. The court granted the order but was furious. She accused me of harassment and said I was trying to ruin her reputation. I just sat there, calm and collected, knowing I had the truth on my side. I kept thinking about how much she'd lied to get her way, how she'd stolen from us and then tried to manipulate the court system. I realized that this fight was about more than money or her betrayal. It was about integrity. She had none. I was determined to see her exposed for who she really was. That's when I decided I had to take more drastic measures. I contacted a forensic data analyst to comb through her phone and computer, looking for any additional evidence. I wanted to uncover if she'd hidden more money or had plans to run away with the kids. I also spoke with a private investigator again to monitor her movements more closely. I couldn't afford to leave anything to chance. If she was planning to disappear or transfer assets, I had to catch her in the act. Throughout all of this, I felt a strange mixture of resolve and despair. I'd loved her once, or at least thought I did. Now I saw her for what she truly was, a bitchy, manipulative liar who'd do anything to win. I kept reminding myself that I wasn't the villain here. I was protecting my family and my future. Every day, I fought to keep my head clear amidst the chaos. The betrayal had cut deep, but it also made me realize what I was fighting for. I wasn't going to let her destroy everything we built, not without a fight. In the end, I learned that sometimes justice isn't quick or easy. It's slow, messy, and requires patience. Thought she could get away with her lies and theft, but I was determined to hold her accountable. I kept my focus on the facts, on proving her wrong, and on protecting my kids from her manipulations. I knew she'd never change, but I also knew that I had the power to expose her, and I was going to do just that. Because at the end of the day, I want my life back, my house, my money, and my dignity, and I was willing to fight for every bit of it. The final court hearing was a whirlwind. Showed up wearing her usual bitchy smirk, trying to act confident, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She knew she was cornered. The evidence I presented was overwhelming: her texts, the bank statements, the private investigator's footage, all laid out like a damning timeline. My lawyer did a good job cross-examining her, exposing her lies one after another. She tried to deny everything, but the court wasn't buying it. Her attempt to paint herself as the innocent victim fell flat when the facts spoke for themselves. I remember feeling a strange calm as the judge listened. I had fought tooth and nail to gather every piece of proof, to protect what was mine. The judge finally ruled in my favor, ordering her to return the stolen money, halting any further asset transfers, and granting me full custody of the kids. His face twisted with rage and frustration. She shouted a few last insults, but her voice sounded hollow. She knew she'd lost control. As she was escorted out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift. Finally, some justice. Walking out of that courtroom, I looked at the house I'd built with her. It was battered, tainted by her lies and betrayal, but it was still ours. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be legal battles over the estate, and I'd have to rebuild trust with my kids, who were understandably confused and hurt. But I also knew I'd come out stronger. I'd learned a brutal lesson about trust, betrayal, and the importance of watching out for myself. In the aftermath, tried to stir trouble, threatening to sue me for custody, claiming I was unfit. But with the evidence I had, her words rang hollow. I stayed calm, focused on rebuilding my life and shielding my children from her manipulations. I filed for full custody, emphasizing her pattern of lies and theft. The court awarded me primary custody, citing her history of dishonesty and her attempt to manipulate the system. It wasn't easy. She kept trying to push her narrative, but I had the facts and I stood firm. Looking back now, I realize how much I've changed. I trusted her once, believed in the fairy tale version of our life. But that trust was shattered, replaced by a hard-earned understanding of who she really was. I've learned that sometimes you have to fight for your dignity, for your future, and for your children. No matter how bitter or unfair it gets, you can't let someone like her win. I've also learned that justice might take time, but it's worth fighting for. Today, I'm slowly putting the pieces back together. I've moved out of the house, started fresh somewhere new, and I'm working on rebuilding what's left of my life. The betrayal still hurts. It's a scar I'll carry forever, but it also made me realize what I truly value: honesty, loyalty, and integrity. I'm not naive anymore. I know people can be manipulative and selfish, but I also know that standing up for yourself is the only way to survive. So to anyone out there going through something similar, my advice is simple. Don't ignore the signs. Trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and fight for what's rightfully yours. Don't let anyone steal your peace, your money, or your dignity. Because in the end, the truth always comes out, sometimes sooner, sometimes later. But it's the only thing that truly matters. And if you do what's right, no matter how hard it gets, you'll come out of it stronger. I did.